There's no denying that landing the MiG-21 in DCS is a handful, and anyone who's done it will likely have experienced some pretty wild mishaps. There are scores of videos out there of players doing it just plain wrong, including one of my own. So for this video, I'll be dipping a bit into what makes the fish bed so touchy and how to deal with it. The MiG's narrow delta wing design is designed primarily for high speed, and as a result it produces a ton of drag and not much lift at low speeds, which makes landing a tricky proposition. To deal with this, it also includes a unique feature called blown flaps, which helps create more lift at low speeds, but it also brings with it an additional challenge. Blown flaps are a means of boundary layer control, which, to keep it simple, are systems designed to prevent airflow from separating from the top of your wing at high angles of attack and delay stalls. I've linked an interesting video in the description discussing the topic if you're inclined to check it out. Blown flaps in particular are touched on towards the end of that video. The MiG's blown flaps only function with landing flaps extended, at speeds lower than 360 km per hour, and at an RPM above 50% on the low pressure compressor, or the needle labeled with a 1 on the gauge. This is why people often suggest not throttling back until after touchdown, but there's more to it than that, and taking it at face value will result in a carrier-esque slam into the ground unless you flare and float halfway down the runway. The MiG also has a very restrictive max landing weight, 6,800 kilos with the boundary layer control enabled. Compare that to its dry weight of 6,255 kilos. The more overweight your jet, the faster your approach and touchdown speeds, which leads to one more limitation. The max touchdown and brake application speed in the 21 is 330 km per hour. Touching down faster than that means you risk blowing a tire. What this means for you as the player is either using or jettisoning overweight payloads and flying with the burner lit to burn off excess fuel, usually with the brakes open and pulling some G to avoid overspeeding. At 6,800 kilos, you'll have 700 liters of fuel with no stores loaded, or 500 liters if you have 250 kilos or less. The weights of different weapons are in the description if you want to do the math, but generally speaking you'll want no more than 2 air-to-air missiles, or 2 UB-16 rocket pods, or empty external fuel tanks with no other weapons. You can get away with all that weight on a single inboard pylon, like a single FAB-250 bomb or the like, but that may cause some problems in a crosswind. For reference, 500 liters of fuel will only give you about 6 minutes of flight time in a traffic pattern. The real-world pilot's handbook allows for overweight landings of up to 7,300 kilos, provided the gear is inspected before taking off again. It also notes that overweight landings should not account for more than 3% of all landings throughout the life of the airframe. Do with that information what you will. I doubt it will make any difference in DCS. The most you'll likely notice is an increase in landing speed. With all that behind us, let's look at the landing checklist. The full checklist includes timing certain steps against the traffic pattern and a few additional things like turning off the pitot heat after landing. For the sake of brevity, we'll just trim it down to the bare essentials since most DCS players are liable to fly straight in approaches anyway. All speeds and altitudes listed are based off the real-world pilot handbook, so they do vary a bit from the DCS manual. Note that speeds for the outer and inner beacons and the flare-out increase by 10 to 15 km per hour with bombs, S-24s, or other heavy payloads. Also note that the goal is to overfly the outer beacon at 200 meters AGL and 360 to 380 km per hour. Commands to slow and descend that don't specify a speed or altitude should work towards that goal. Check boundary layer control on. Check normal hydraulic and pneumatic pressure. Bear in mind that with a pneumatic pressure under 70, you'll have no brakes or drogue chute, so be ready on the emergency brake on touchdown. Check anti-skid on. Set armament control switches off. Slow to 500 to 550 km per hour. Lower gear and adjust RPM to maintain 500 km per hour. Watch for side slip during gear extension. Leave the gear handle down. Check 3 greens on gear. Check your hydraulic pressure recovers to 210. Trim. Check the nose cone is retracted. Check brake pressure to ensure your brakes are not applied. Extend takeoff flaps and counter the nose up tendency with the stick. Slow and begin to descend. Extend landing flaps at 400 to 420 km per hour and continue to slow and descend as needed. Overfly the outer beacon at 200 meters at 360 to 380 kilometers per hour. When you reach 360 kilometers per hour and your boundary layer control kicks in, your angle of attack should indicate 2 to 2.5 degrees shallower than it would if boundary layer control were not engaged. Ensure the nozzle open light is extinguished. If it comes on, your boundary layer control will cut off. Continue to slow and descend, and aim to overfly your inner beacon at 330 to 340 kilometers per hour and at 60 to 80 meters above ground level. Once you've overflown the inner beacon, continue to descend and aim at a point 150 to 200 meters from the runway threshold and maintain 330 kilometers per hour all the way down from there. At 20 to 30 meters above ground level, shift your glance to the left of the nose. At 8 to 10 meters, smoothly flare with an aim to stop your descent at 1 meter. Simultaneously reduce the throttle to the boundary layer control gate, marked on the throttle body, and around 50 to 55% RPM. If you throttle back too far, the boundary layer control will cut off, immediately recognizable by the nozzle open light coming on and the jet suddenly dropping like a rock the rest of the way to the ground. As you settle the remaining meter, smoothly increase the stick back, and then about 2 seconds before touchdown, pull the stick back more vigorously to prevent the nose from abruptly dropping. In normal landing profile and weight, the plane will touch down around 260 to 280 kilometers per hour with the stick almost fully aft. Continue looking to the left of the nose, using the edge of the runway to stay straight. Keep the stick in the same position until you've settled into a smooth rollout on your mains. Idle the throttle and let the nose lower smoothly. Look forward, retract your flaps, begin braking, again smoothly. Deploy your drogue chute if needed. Disengage your nose wheel brake, clear the runway, and jettison your chute. If you're comfortable enough with the boundary layer control and the MiG's slow speed handling, you can open the drogue chute up to 1 meter above ground level to reduce your landing roll in a pinch. In this case, you'll slow down aggressively and should touch down around 250 kilometers per hour or so. If you do decide to do this, please record it in post because that sounds fascinating to watch. Now that we have all of that out of the way, let's have a quick demonstration. To keep it simple, I'll be doing it with 700 liters of fuel and no external stores. Alright, and here we are in the cockpit. So, situation, we are about 1,000 meters above the ground, 30 kilometers outside of Nalchik, pretty much lined up with the runway. We'll clean that up here in a minute. And about 600 liters of fuel. So, as soon as I unpause, I'm just going to focus on flying, and then I'm going to edit in a bit of a commentary post-production, just so that way I can pay attention to what I'm doing. I've also got this all set up on a kneeboard page or two for the checklist, so I'm going to try to follow along with that visually, so you'll be able to see what I'm doing in the post-production commentary. And here we go. Okay, post-production checking in. First thing you'll notice is that I had not realized while recording this that the mouse cursor is not displaying. I was trying to circle things as I focused on them. But first, the boundary layer control above the RSBN there, the nose wheel brake up front, hydraulic pressure down below the radar, pneumatic pressure on the right-hand console, the anti-skid next to the throttle, and then I went from there, reducing speed, trying to get down to 550 so I could extend the gear. I had not done the armament controls yet. I managed to go past that as I read. There's 550, gear down. Did not do a very good job controlling for slip, but you know, that's life. And I noticed the armament controls right about there. You can see me clicking them off and getting behind the jet. It's a recurring problem for me, as well as losing speed. Checking on the runway line up there. But in any case, we got the gear, the 3 greens. Just dropped the first notch of flaps. Checking the hydraulic pressure. Should have checked the pneumatic pressure somewhere in there, behind the stick down low, making sure both needles read 0 for the brakes. Bringing the speed down. And any second now I should be cutting in the next notch of flaps. As well, I would have checked the cone on the front panel next to the arming, making sure that it's all the way retracted. Trying to do all of this in the correct order in the pressure of the situation while you're out of practice is a handful. You can definitely see that. I'm just trying to rein in my speed. I noticed I was a little high on the approach, so I'm trying to bring it down a skosh without gaining speed. And since I don't have my altimeter adjusted, I am reliant on the radar altimeter to pick up distance from above ground level as I approach the outer beacon. And this is also with no wind, so that would further complicate things, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's the outer beacon, just under 400 meters, so a little high. You can hear me bringing back power, trying to lose altitude as well as rein the speed in time for the inner beacon. Trying to catch it before I sink too low. 100. 95, there's the inner beacon, so a little high, but not bad. Meters looking left. 10 meters starting my flare. Flared a little aggressively, but I got it in the end. Touchdown about 250, which is about right on. Well, not right on, but about on the numbers. And back to the live commentary. So as you can see, I didn't need the chute. I feel like I was a bit high for most of the approach, and I flared a bit too aggressively. I could have done that a little bit later and a little bit smoother, so I did balloon a skosh there. But I did still get a nice smooth touchdown. I didn't see the speed at the time of the touchdown. Probably mentioned that during the post-production commentary, which we'll find out once I record that. In any case, that's pretty much the long and the short of it. As you can see, that was a fairly smooth touchdown. I didn't need the chute at all. And granted, this is a fairly long runway, but still, it's fiddly, and I am out of practice. But once you get it down, once you're comfortable with it, it's not as daunting as it seems for a lot of folks. Alright, now this is post-commentary again. I didn't realize that my microphone was off for this part. This is another shot, this time on the Nevada map, and I'm shooting at my old nemesis, Lincoln County Airport. Now this one is a lot trickier. It's a 1,400 meter long runway. The MiG's absolute lower limit, I believe, is 1,200 meters, so this is really one you gotta stick. And it also does not have an inner or outer beacon, so you really have to eyeball it. And then further exacerbating the issue, I did not set my altimeter again. So I don't know how high above ground level I am all the way through. But similar setup, 30 kilometers out, set through the mission editor at 1,000 meters AGL. And this one I pretty much just spent more time focusing on the flying and less time on trying to demonstrate with what I would later find out was an invisible mouse cursor. So, BLC on, nose wheel on, hydraulic pressure, pneumatic pressure, armament control switches, you can see me clicking off there. Anti-skid I likely glanced at as I did the boundary layer control. Trying to keep track of where the runway is in unfamiliar terrain while simultaneously shedding speed. There we go, starting to get the speed reined in. And at this point I got the impression I was still a little bit high. I think I might have ballooned during the checks. Or, well, popped up rather. But, speed in check, gear down. Got 3 greens. Hydraulic pressure is recovered. Cone is retracted. Left the handle down and watching the speed there. You can't really tell, but I am adjusting the trim as I go. And you can see I've put in the first notch of flaps there. I have that mapped to my Otis, so I didn't have to look at it. Speed is coming down pretty hard, but I'm also a bit high, so you'll see me throttle up a skosh and bring it down a little harder than I probably needed to, or rather throttled up more than I needed to. But it all works out. And you can see I've got the second notch of flaps in there. And since I didn't really do a proper look at the map, I wasn't sure if the terrain rose up, so I wasn't completely sure if the radar altimeter was going to give me an accurate read on whether or not I was on the right altitude. And I hadn't set my altimeter, so I was really just kind of judging it based off of how the runway looked, which can be deceptive, especially with this small of a runway if you're used to larger ones. You can kind of see, not at the moment, but as I glance down every now and again, you can see my fuel tank group light flashing, indicating that it's running low. That's often a good indication that you're light enough to land if you have no external stores. It's a handy, it's not precise, but it's a handy kind of spitball it sort of number. I'm on speed, pretty much on altitude, I believe. Again, no marker beacons to really tell. It's 80. 20, 10, starting to nose up, and I did flatten out a little too much on the flare again, but there's the touchdown. Pop the chute and braking hard. Really don't have a lot of room to play with on this one. Checking that the chute did deploy properly, probably a little later than I should have, and stopped. Alright, well, that was a ride. So that's Lincoln County Airport. Definitely did a lot better than the last time. Heard a scrape that sounded like it might have been my tail dinging the ground. Take a quick external look at that. Well, no visible damage, but who knows if that's just DCS not modeling it. But there you go. That's landing the MiG-21 on a pretty damn short runway, so I feel pretty good about that. And that's about all there is to it. It's a lot to deal with all at once, but once you get the feel of it, things will start to fall into place and it'll feel more and more natural. Thanks for taking the time to sit through all of this with me and have fun putting it into practice.